All right, so the most common situation is what we would call in the fabric, where the upper jumper is entangled in the fabric of lower jumper's canopy. The good news about an in the fabric entanglement is that the jumper from the jumper's head up is typically clear. So most of the time, with an in the fabric entanglement, most of the time we have a good canopy on top that's flying in some type of controlled flight, which makes things simpler and easier to deal with and much easier to climb out if they have to. So for an in the fabric entanglement above 2,000 feet, top jumper attempt to clear themselves out of that entanglement by following the risers. If the top jumper can clear the entanglement and get rid of the lower jumper, at this point, both jumpers, the top jumper and the lower jumper, whose canopy was just wrapped around somebody, both need to do a full check of their components, make sure your handles are in place, make sure a riser hasn't been cut through by a line sawing on it, make sure everything's where it should be. I've come out of entanglements before and had my cutaway handle almost a foot extracted. I look up and I've got like a ½ inch of cable in both of my 3-rings. I'm like, yeah, I think I'll put those back. Slide that stuff back in, put that handle away. I've also come out of entanglements and found my reserve ripcord floating. So something caught it at some point and they put that thing back away. But the most important one is to do a really good canopy control check. Make sure the parachute is safe to land. What happens a lot of times is jumpers don't realize the parachute looks fine, it's going straight, but when they try to flare it or turn it, it folds up and collapses on them. I've actually seen this happen at competitions for canopy formation where someone landed a parachute they shouldn't. I've had teammates and myself have to cut away because the parachute was damaged, even though it looked good. Remember, the damage could be on the inside where the ribs have separated from the upper surface, therefore completely diminishing all of the lift that the parachute could provide you. A good sign of this is when you look for your teammates and they're all up there. Yeah, you're probably on your way down. Above 2,000 feet, unable to disengage. At this point, the upper jumper, the one with the good canopy up there, tells the lower jumper to cut away. Now, the reason the upper jumper doesn't cut away is he's wrapped up in a parachute. So his chances of clearing that other canopy after he cuts away from his canopy are pretty slim to get that reserve out. Plus, he's got to take lower jumper with him. So with a good controllable, semi-controllable canopy on top, upper jumper wrapped up in fabric, tell the lower jumper to cut away. Now, once that lower jumper cuts away, it's going to take all the lines and blow behind him. So at this point, we've got fabric on us and we've got lines behind us. That's okay. If you've got the fabric here, control it, contain it, keep it from inflating. Try to tuck it in where you can. But it's safer and easier to hold the fabric on you, get control of your parachute, slow it down. The slower you go, the less air is trying to open this canopy that's on you, and fly nice and slow. If you can do that, bring that parachute in and land with it. If you try to get it off of you and a line snags on something, for the military guys, it snags on your weapon, snags on your O2, or on some of the other half a dozen things you got attached to you. If it snags on that and then reinflates behind you, it's going to do things that you have no control over. And once it does that, it's going to either downplane to the earth or it's going to try to come up and wrap up your canopy. So it's typically safer to keep the fabric on you and let the lines fly behind you and just go slow. In this video, we've got these guys from Florida that made that video called Breakaway. They have a simulated in the fabric entanglement right here. So as you can see, the lower jumper's canopy is in some way around the upper jumper, but the upper jumper's head and above appear to be clear. And obviously in the video you can see, I'll hit play, you can see how that upper canopy is flying stable and straight. So obviously we've doubled the wing loading on that top canopy, so there's more wind, more noise, and it's more responsive. So in that video, you saw lower jumper cut away, you saw the free bag come off. Here's what it looks like from below. No twisting, just talk to that other jumper. Tell them what you want them to do or what they need you to do. At this point, upper jumper saying, hey, I think I can get out, Lower jumper should be saying, hey man, 3,000 feet. Upper jumper says, all right, I can't get out, you got to cut away. Lower jumper says, see ya, I'm out of here. Obviously, this guy was able to get rid of that canopy because he wasn't really wrapped up in it. But if you're wrapped up in it, just keep the fabric on you. That's safer than trying to get rid of it. What if I'm above 1,000 feet, but I'm below 2,000 feet? So a lot of military groups have the option that they can land 2 jumpers on one canopy, or the lower jumper can cut away. We have this same option in the sport world as well, but with smaller, faster parachutes, it makes the decision a little easier. For myself, if I'm above 1,000 feet, I would prefer to go ahead and cut away and get my reserve out immediately than try to land 2 people on one parachute. However, it depends on the situation. So what are the conditions? Is it gusty and turbulent? Is it thermally with dust devils? Is the landing area smooth desert or smooth vegetation? Or is it rocky, hilly terrain? And what level of control does the upper jumper have? Is he physically holding on to me and saving my life? In which case, he has no control of slowing his main parachute down. He can control its direction by using harness, and he can do that, but he can't really slow it down. So that's going to be a pretty rough landing for both of us. But if I'm hung on that jumper and he can actually slow his parachute down to at least half brakes and land both of us, then that might be an option for us to stay together. That option is going to come up again in some of the other entanglement scenarios that we're going to talk about. The biggest thing is, though, if you're that lower jumper, especially for the military guys, if you've got extra weight, get rid of it if you know you're going to have to land with that dude. If you've got a ruck or whatever you can get rid of, and it's not mission critical for that particular jump, go ahead and get rid of it. I think the other thing is, if I have that option, I'm probably going to get a little bit of input from the other person as well. And if that other person up there cannot see where they're going and you have to land with them because they're covered in fabric, you might want to give them a little guidance on where to turn or to lean to avoid maybe some hard objects on the ground. So what if we're below 1,000 feet with a controllable upper canopy? Once we reach 1,000 feet above the surface, cutaway is no longer an option. Most jumpers that cut away under 1,000 feet don't make it. Some do, but most do not. So in this situation, if that upper canopy is in control and we're landing in somewhere in a safe area, I would not pull my reserve. I would just stay with you and land with you. Because once that lower jumper pulls his reserve, or if upper jumper does as well, things are going to get crazy in the beginning, because parachutes are going to inflate and go different directions. So if I don't have to make it crazy and it's a very controlled descent to the ground, I might just stick with you. I may not pull my reserve for a controlled situation. All right, so what if we're below 1,000 feet and the upper canopy is out of control? In other words, we have no good canopies. We're going to be killed or permanently injured. Again, cutaway is not an option. We don't have the altitude to separate, go into free fall, and deploy a reserve, even with an RSL, even with a skyhook. We don't have that time. So once we're under $1,000, at this point, we're going to be looking at the other option, which is add fabric. Lower jumper first. Lower jumper, fire the reserve. Get that reserve coming out. It only takes a few hundred feet for that reserve to come out and start inflating. And if that reserve does inflate, it may catch the whole entanglement and now have both jumpers under one reserve. I actually saw this happen at the 2003 World Championships in France, where a team was going in, a reserve pops out under 500 feet, grabs both jumpers, flies into a tree, and both jumpers walked away. I think if they'd have hit the ground, they might have been injured, but it definitely saved both jumpers' lives. So it is completely doable. Now, the other jumper may also pull their reserve as well and add even more fabric. But once those reserves come out, they're going to do different things. So if both jumpers have an open canopy that if they weren't tied together, they could control, then we have the option of the lower jumper having the potential to release the entanglement and transfer onto the already open reserve. It's called a canopy transfer, and these have been successfully done all the way down to 200 feet. So it is an option to open the reserve first and then get rid of the things that are tying you together. The only thing we have to be aware of is if we pull our reserve and it opens, we got to make sure we're not the only good canopy. So don't just release the entanglement unless the other jumper has something to land as well. Because if he doesn't, you want to keep that jumper underneath you and land him with you. So in conclusion, for an in the fabric entanglement above 2,000 feet, upper jumper is going to tell lower jumper to cut away first. Lower jumper cuts away first. And then upper jumper has the canopy on them and they deal with that.